Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday the 16th of December, and joining me on this edition our assistant editor Steve Withers.
I have a bad feeling about this.
And news editor Mark Hodgkinson.
There's always a bigger fish.
Me's a Jar Jar Binks. Right, well, it's 1 day to go when this podcast goes out. Obviously, it's 3 days to go when we're recording it. But Force Awakens. It's
actually, in my case, less than a day.
It's the big event of the month. This outclasses everything else that happens in December. But what if it isn't any good?
Well, personally, I'm getting a bit sick of Star Wars now, and I haven't even seen it yet. But just the total saturation of every media now with Star Wars-related stuff is just driving me up the wall. It's like, it's only a film.
You don't even watch the Disney Channel like I do.
Oh, that must just be saturation.
Oh, it is just nothing. I have to leave the room.
But that point aside, which is kind of winding me up, and I should be glad to get it out of the way now. Is it going to be any good? I think if you look at the prequels, and this is obviously why we're talking about it and why we were quoting from The Phantom Menace, because, you know, we've got to remember back in 99 we were all up for it. It was mass hysteria and they weren't that good. But that was just one person, right? I mean, it was all down to Lucas, pretty much, writing it, directing it, producing it, calling the shots. I got a feeling that this, being as it's a collaborative effort with people involved who really know what they're doing, and more important, people that are involved that are actually fans. J.J. Abrams is a Star Wars fan. He knows the prequels are crap. He's not an idiot, and he knows that what he wants to do is follow on from the original trilogy and deliver, an episode 7 that is worthy of it. So I think he's got the pressure on his shoulders, and he appreciates what he's trying to do. I think Kathleen Kennedy knows what she's doing. She's no idiot. She's been working for years as a producer for Steven Spielberg. She knows a good film when she sees one, and she knows a bad film when she sees one. I mean, she was involved with Crystal Skull, so she knows when it can go wrong.
You see, I think the positivity here is that Phantom Menace and the prequels, basically, Revenge of the Sith, it's all right. The rest of them are utter garbage, and the reaction to that, I think they had to take the approach that they've taken, which is back to practical effects, back to collaboration. I notice you've probably watched Screen Junkies, because that opening was almost the whole argument of Screen Junkies' latest video, Steve.
Yes. But they're right. It is collaborative. It is collaborative, and they are going to be using practical effects and shooting on film and doing all the things that were done with the original movies.
But the important thing is story and storyline, and how easy are Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher not going to slip back into roles that they haven't played for 30 odd years.
I think that is probably the slight worry. Even some of the trailers, they look slightly uncomfortable. Harrison Ford does anyway, to me. So I'll just have to wait to see how it transmits in the full movie. But as long as they nail how it looks and make it exciting and fun, and that'll be enough for me, I think.
The big thing about the prequels to me was that there was no protagonist at all. Whose story was it that you were supposed to be following? Lucas says it was Vader's, and there's different theories and all that. But the thing was that you didn't have the breadth of characters that you had in the original trilogy. You didn't have the rogue element that was Han Solo. You didn't have the camaraderie, the buddy relationship. You didn't have any of that going on, and you didn't have any characters that you could really like. I mean, you think about the prequels, and there's no characters there that really stand out, and you think, yeah, I really liked that character. I want to see, apart from Boba Fett and Jango Fett. You think,
well, even that I could have done without.
You could have done without it, yeah. But thinking about the 3 prequels, that's probably the characters that I thought, yeah, okay, that's Star Wars. But the rest of it, it just didn't capture that magic at all. It didn't have that wonder, that the spectacle. It didn't have the protagonist. It didn't have the good versus evil.
Yeah, and also, by his own admission, Lucas is no great director of actors. I mean, his direction's usually faster or more intense. That's about the only direction he gives to actors. And in Star Wars, he sensibly cast people that were basically playing themselves. So, the gee-whiz, young, gung-ho farm boy, Mark Hamill could probably play that in his sleep. It was kind of his personality. The cocksure, cocky, space pirate, that's, Han Solo could do that. I'm sorry, Harrison Ford could do Han Solo in his sleep. So they only had to play themselves, really. They didn't have to stretch themselves too much. Same goes for Carrie Fisher. And where he did have good actors, Peter Cushing playing a villainous role, again, he can do that in his sleep. And Alec Guinness could do Obi-Wan Kenobi without re-stretching himself whatsoever. So there was no need for much direction in terms of acting. When he got to the prequels, he hired some really good actors. It's not like there weren't good actors in these films. Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman's won an Oscar since then, Samuel L. Jackson. These are all perfectly good actors. And yet they're awful in these films. And it's not just because the dialogue's bad. I mean, they clearly aren't being directed. They're just standing in a green screen with no idea what's going on.
I think the only one that passes with flying colours is Ian McDermott.
Yeah. He probably is the best of the lot. And maybe because, he basically goes for it, doesn't he? I mean, he's hamming it up a treat at times, as he was in Jedi. And maybe if the other actors have perhaps just relaxed a bit and had more fun with the parts. Instead of basically you've got Ewan McGregor trying to do an impression of Alec Guinness half the time. You've got Hayden Christensen playing, a psychopathic loony who, I'm assuming Padme would run a mile from if she actually saw in real life. So, yeah, I think a lot of the blame for the prequels really you can rest on Lucas's shoulders. And given that he's not remotely involved in these, it can only be better, I think. Whether it's going to live up to the expectation, the hype is another issue. I mean, I think it would probably be a decent movie. J.J. Abrams, to be honest, hasn't made a proper, complete movie yet. He's made 2/3 of a good film quite a few times. I think he tried to have his cake and eat it a bit too much with Star Trek Into Darkness. So whether it's going to be as great as everyone hopes it's going to be, I don't know. I think it'll be fun. And if it's fun and enjoyable, 2 hours in the flicks, that's the main thing.
I mean, we were talking about collaboration, but there's also the rule of being run by committee and what might happen with that type of approach as well. So he has to be strong. Take the collaboration, take the input, but he has to be strong and he has to direct it and get it on the screen. I think if there's anybody that could do it with so much expectation riding on it, you got to say JJ would be your. I can't
think of a better choice to direct.
No, I think he'd be my choice because you just have to look at how he gets that whole genre of filmmaking like for Super 8. And he picked up on all the old-fashioned 80s way of making movies and that came across. So he gets it, I think. Yeah.
I certainly. I know this is going to sound like I'm being, rewriting history, but I can prove it. I was saying back in '97 when the special editions came out, I was saying, based upon this, I think the prequels are going to be very good. And history eventually brought me out to be correct. But this time around, I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking everything I've seen so far suggests to me that we're going to get a really well-made, fun movie. And at the end of the day, that's all I want.
It has to be fun, and I think what put my mind at rest was the little joke between Harrison Ford and Daisy, where he hands her the gun. Because in one trailer, you only see him handing the gun saying, I think you need this. Mm-hmm. But then the next trailer, you actually get the play, I think I know how to handle myself. And he says, yeah, I know, that's why I'm giving you it. If that's the type of humour and stuff that's going to, it should be fine. It should be all right. It's like anything else, though. If it gets overhyped, too much expectation, then people are going to get let down, even if it is a great movie. It doesn't have to be a superb movie. Even if it's a good movie, a great movie, then you're going to get some people that are going to be down on it because people have their own, they know the universe and so on, they're going to have their own preconceptions of what they think it should be.
There are people going into this movie expecting it to bring world peace and cure cancer, and I'm afraid it's not going to do that. I mean, it's going to be a film at the end of the day, and it's going to be a film. I mean, let's be honest. Who's got the most riding on this? Disney, because if this film didn't do well, if it wasn't well received, they've already got 2 other films in production, so they need this to be a success, not just commercially but also critically, and so there's an awful lot of weight riding on J.J. Abrams' shoulders at the moment, but I think he's going to deliver. I think he knows exactly what he's doing.
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Yeah. I'm not worried at all.
And what I love most is that I'm going into this film on Wednesday night with no idea about the plot. This is great. I really am going into it, even though I've seen the trailers. I mean, I can expect certain sequences and think, that's going to look cool. But I really don't know what's going to happen in terms of plot or what, how it's all set up. So it's great to go into a film looking forward to it, but also being to a certain extent not knowing what to expect. It's a nice change these days.
As long as we've got a good idea of the plot when we're leaving, then I'll be happy.
Yep, I think the one thing though, Steve, is that I will be avoiding your review. I will not be proofing it. You'll have to get somebody else to proof it for you. And I am avoiding the internet on Thursday. I don't see it till 11 o'clock on Friday morning. I'll be avoiding the internet. Twitter will not be switched on at any point, and I'll be avoiding anything that mentions Star Wars on the TV.
It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, good luck there.
No, I'm in the same boat until 8 o'clock.
As long as I'm not standing in a queue and somebody does a Homer, then I'll be quite happy.
That's easily avoided.
And they're standing in queues. These days I haven't got a queue for anything. You just turn up with your ticket and go straight in.
Oh, well, I've got an e-ticket. I mean, how advanced is the cinema these days? You don't even need a ticket.
It's earplugs for when you're actually getting into the cinema. Well, you do, when you're getting out of the car or walking into the cinema, put some earplugs in so you don't accidentally overhear anything on the way into the cinema.
I hadn't thought of that, but I've got.
And don't remove the earplugs until the credits start to roll. The Walt Disney logo.
That is a really good idea.
Well, you see, that's going to be the strange thing, isn't it? No 20th Century Fox CinemaScope fanfare at the start, and then the silence, and then the In a Galaxy Far, Far Away. I mean, it's going to be completely different, having that Disney logo at the start. It's not going to be Star Wars, is it?
No, I think we'll soon get over that, to be fair.
You going to start crying, Mark?
I don't know. I think I might. I really do. I am emotional about it.
What about you, Steve?
I don't know. I've actually got a bit emotional on some of the trailers, so possibly. I just feel I'm getting a bit sick of the hype now. That I just want to get it over with now. It's like, okay, just get on with it. It's because everywhere you look, it's Star Wars at the moment.
I saw some Star Wars tissues in the pound shop. Stormtroopers on the front. Yeah,
but even the local Spar here, it's all Star Wars stuff everywhere, wherever you look.
But if it isn't any good, obviously we need to have people should start manning Samaritan's hotlines in case there's suicidal 40-year-olds.
I don't think it'll be as bad as that. I mean, my favourite speech of all time, and there's a whole load of political speeches and everything else. The pale insignificance against the speech from Spaced.
Oh, about you weren't there at the beginning.
You weren't there at the beginning. That's probably the best speech ever. Especially when the camera then flicks round and he's talking to a 6-year-old.
Yeah. Tim, it's been 18 months. Let it go. I don't remember when I saw The Phantom Menace, I was so horribly in denial that I went to go and see it 3 more times in a desperate attempt to convince myself that it was good.
I saw it multiple times and nothing helped. Because you went the second time thinking, all right, so I was a bit hyped. I'll give it another go. And then the third time, okay, it can't be that bad. And at the time you're thinking, well, it's not that bad. I mean, the lightsaber fight's good and all that. And then no, it was shit.
I watched the original trilogy over the weekend in preparation, and whilst I enjoyed them, as I always do, God, it's so annoying when those stupid little extra bits pop up because they're not even well done. Some of the effects are well ropey.
Yeah,
the whole it's rubbish.
Yeah, the Star Wars is A New Hope, which is still Star Wars to me, is ruined because it has the most changes made to it. Empire, I think, gets away with it because the only real changes are to Cloud City, and there's that extra scene with Vader going to his shuttle.
Which is unnecessary. I mean, in the original version, he just says, "Bring my shuttle," and that's right?
Yeah, okay. And I did it. Yeah, point made.
Economy of filmmaking, boys.
Yeah. I don't think they tampered that much with Return of the Jedi either. I think it was only the end part where they put Hayden Christensen back in as a ghost.
And all the celebrations and stuff in a different
time. Well, that was changed. Yeah, they got rid of Nope.
Got rid of
Yup.
No. Well, I mean, let's be honest, Jedi's not very good anyway, so they can do it light to that. Empire still stands up, and in fact, they did the least number of changes to that. And what they did change actually slightly improved it in the sense of making Cloud City appear more populated and slightly bigger than it was in the original version. That's probably quite good, and they had a few more shots of the ice monster, snow monster. Again, because that suit didn't work when they were shooting it, so okay, fair enough. Otherwise, though, it's left largely alone, which I think demonstrates that it was a bloody well-made film at the time. Star Wars, I just wish I could just watch the film I saw in 1977 with all the mistakes and the crappy effects and the whatever. Just give me the film you made then.
Yeah.
And if you want to do another version, feel free. It's entirely your option. But it's the fact you don't get the opportunity or the option to watch the film as it was seen originally.
Yeah, you can't sit down and watch the 77 version unless you got a Laserdisc player.
Yeah, I got it on DVD, but it's it's not anamorphic. It's well ropey.
Oh, was it on that special edition? Was it?
Yeah, it's taken from the Laserdisc transfer, so it's not very good. And come on, just give me. I mean, at least Spielberg's got the right idea on that front.
He got burnt on E.T., didn't he?
Yeah.
Changing the guns to walkie-talkies and that. It took away the threat. It took away the whole point of that section of the movie. It just changed it, tonally changed it. The chase. Oh, yeah.
And he also adding some CG stuff to E.T. himself. I think it was a big mistake, and he realised that and said, "You know what? I'm not doing that again." But anyway, now that Lucas is gone, I guess it's up to Disney, isn't it? If they want to do a release of the original versions.
I think it's something to do with licensing. I'm almost certain that is the case.
20th Century Fox.
That is why we haven't seen the original versions on Blu-ray so far, is because of the original licensing deal, which I believe runs to 2017 or 2018. So, and I'm only going on a rumour there, I'm not 100% sure, so don't take that as gospel, but that is certainly what I've read, that they have distribution rights on the original films.
It might have been a 20-year deal from the reissues back in 1997, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
It would make sense. I don't know if that's true, though.
2017.
That's pure speculation on Steve's part there, so do not
Yes, that is
us.
totally speculation.
Anyway, we've spent the first 20 minutes talking about Star Wars. Let's move it on and...
Just wait till next week.
Yeah, you thought that was bad? Current competitions. Mark, tell us all about them, because we haven't heard much of your voice yet.
We have got one competition, but it's a rather spiffing one, and that is to win let's get into his page, the Yamaha RX A3040 AV receiver, and that's courtesy of Scan, and that's open to the 30th of December to all members. That's your lot.
Any winners?
No previous winners.
No?
Nope.
Because the other competition doesn't actually finish until tomorrow.
Yeah, Rouge Nation doesn't close till tomorrow. So
we'll announce that later next week.
Yeah.
I swear that word is now ruined for me. It really is.
Wait till Star Wars Anthology Rouge 1 comes out.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Right then, let's move on. I noticed you put a tweet up at the weekend, Steve, saying review samples a bit like buses, 3 come along all at once. And it has been a bit like that in the last sort of week. We've had loads turning up for review, lots of stuff to talk about. I guess the main one for a lot of people on the podcast, and maybe one of the reasons why some people are listening that don't normally listen in, welcome to you, the XT910 from Hisense. It's their high-end TV, Steve. It's not cheap, but it is certainly cheaper than those that it's competing against in terms of features and so on. So I know you've had it running over the weekend to get it up and running and basically to soak it in. You ran your first tests this morning. This is in no way a finished review.
Absolutely not.
But what's your initial opinion?
Mixed, to be honest. There's some aspects of it that are very good. Some aspects that probably aren't quite so good. I think overall, for a first effort, I mean, given this is the first sort of flagship TV that Hisense have released in this country, I think it's reasonably good, and it's obviously aimed at. I mean, let's be honest. There's been a lot of hype and a lot of expectation on the forums amongst people, which probably was a little over the top. I think you needed to calm down a little bit and think, okay, well, hang on, this is a $2,000 telly from Hisense. That's their first TV in the marketplace. It's not going to be, all things to all people. It's not going to be the best TV ever made. It certainly isn't going to be perfect because no TV is perfect. So people need to, I think, temper their expectations a little bit here. And there's been some owners, people have bought them, and there's been a few people that are very happy. There's been a few people that have sent them back for various reasons. And AVForums members, quite often, they're enthusiasts. They're very into their tech and particularly their TVs. And they can be very fussy. So whilst I suspect the majority of the population would turn it on and think, wow, that's a great picture, there's going to be people that are going to look at it and see flaws. And that's understandable. And that applies pretty much to any television. You can find flaws in anything if you want to. But overall, I think it's a pretty good first effort. So in terms of initial impressions, getting out of the box, setting it up, now everyone's probably seen pictures of it. It is at a very acute angle. For some reason, Hisense engineers think it's ideal for viewing. I think it's only applicable if the TV is very low down and you're sat very high up. I think for most people, their TV will probably be at about chest height to them when they're sat down. So it really, the solution is either to put put a book or something behind it to wedge it a bit higher up, or wall mount it. As it is. The angle's a bit too much. I mean, it's been done before. I know Sony did it with their monolith design, didn't they? That was angled, and Panasonic do it with some of their models as well. They're angled. But for my money, I'd rather have it face on. In terms of the screen itself, it's not too reflective, so that's good. Although, because it's angled, it is reflecting a light that's on the ceiling above it just because of the angle of the screen rather than because it's inherently reflective. Build quality is reasonably good. It's not like super, it's not like a CZ952, but no one's expecting that for £2,000, so that's fine. And then in terms of sound quality, I've got to say, is very good and really impressive, actually. It's a really good sounding TV. Lovely, clear, bright. Not bright as in terms of bright, but lovely, clear. Nice wide open front downstage. Dialogue's really good. So I've got to say, sound-wise, great. It's got 4 HDMI inputs, 2 of which are HDMI 2.0, HDCP 2.2, and 2 of which are just normal HDMI inputs, so HDMI 1.4.
And you've checked these and they are?
Yes, yes, I have. And as far as I'm aware, and I can't actually check this, but I don't think it's the case at the moment, they are not HDMI 2.0A. Although the TV will support HDR, whether we'll have to upgrade these inputs at some point to pass the metadata, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone really does at the moment. I mean, some manufacturers say they think they will be able to, some not so sure. But at the moment, they're HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2 on 2 of the inputs. So what else have we got?
Well, you're missing the main one here. Most people are going to be biting. What's the picture quality like?
Oh, I'm getting to that. Building up to it. I've got to wait. There are a lot of picture modes. And the obvious one to go for is theatre mode, which certainly has that uses the warm white balance setting, grayscale, and has the color gamut that is closest to Rec 709, although it's oversaturated compared to Rec 709. It is quite a bit wider than Rec 709, even in that mode. If you pick any of the other modes, and you can set all the other modes up to basically look exactly the same, there's a definite difference between theatre mode and any of the other modes. And there seems to be more processing going on in the theatre mode, possibly to bring in the color gamut, because the native color gamut is really wide. It actually measures 92% of DCI, but that's because it's a little bit between where yellow is that's not being measured against DCI, but actually green and going out where cyan is, they're actually wider than DCI. It's a huge color space. And I think taming that in is tricky. And I've tried using the CMS to get the theatre mode into closer to Rec 709, and really it's going to struggle, to be honest. What would be the more appropriate solution is basically just bringing in the color control a bit, because it's such a wide color space. You can do the gamma now, Mark, on the KT321. Was that what did that measure at?
Very, very high. So it was over 3 at 10 stim, and then it's sort of in the middle. It was between 2.7 and 2.5.
Right. This goes about sort of measuring against 2.4. It goes up to 2.5, and then basically measures along 2.4 for the rest of the curve. So it's nowhere near as bad as that.
Yeah.
It's crushing blacks a little bit just above black. That's what it's doing. But otherwise, the gamma curve is reasonably good. Grayscale track's okay. It's a little bit too much blue in all the other settings. If you use standard, there's a bit too much red in it if you use the warm setting, which isn't unusual, to be honest. Obviously, the cool setting's got shed loads of blue in it. The grayscale, the white balance control appears to work reasonably well. Getting the grayscale into something where the errors are all below 1, you can do that. The big question is going to be, because what some people have reported on the forums, and this is true, is that in the theatre mode there appears to be some noise and banding being introduced in the image. Quite why that is, I'm not sure yet, but that's definitely not apparent on, say, the natural picture image. Natural picture image mode. So it's looking like what you might want to do is use the natural mode, or one of the other modes, natural, standard, whatever. Bring in the color a bit, calibrate the grayscale, and you get a pretty nice image. So there's a lot of variables here that I'm still working with, because I've never seen a Hisense before, so I'm having to test absolutely everything in it to try and work out what the hell it's doing. What it hasn't got, for example, is any kind of gamma control, but the contrast control, I don't know if you found it on the 321 mark, but the contrast control, I've got it down at like 46. If you put it even up to 50, it clips. And it goes up to 100, by the way. It just starts clipping everything.
I never had it that high. No, it was defaulted to 50, I think.
Yeah, we need to bring it down even lower than that.
Yes, I did. No, the first thing I did with the TV was knock the colour down and knock the contrast down to even make it watchable.
Yeah. So, having said all that, when you're actually watching content, it looks very nice. The screen uniformity is surprisingly good, and there's no banding on it, which which you did see on, say, on direct LED backlights on, say, even the JS9500, which is not exactly a cheap television. There is a bit of colour fringing along the edges of the screen, though, a bit of a green tinge, which has nothing to do with the calibration or overall. It seems to be a panel issue. It's not massively obvious. You can see it on a white screen. So if I'm watching Fargo tonight, that might be a very good test of that. And the actual handling of signals. So on the 321 mark with, was it 50 hertz? You had a bit of an issue.
Yeah, with the movement, a bit of a tiny break up to the image.
Yeah, there's nothing like that on this.
Well,
So that's handling, motion handling, and handling different signals, 60 hertz, 50 hertz, 24p, all fine. So it's like I said, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's got some good aspects. The black levels are great. I've got to say, the black levels and the local dimming. It's only an on or off option, but it seems to work very well. The viewing angles aren't bad. It's a VA panel, so lots of aspects of it are great. But there are other aspects which certainly, I think the one overriding aspect, there was two aspects really that I need to investigate further. One is, what's theatre mode doing and why? And two is there any way of reining in the colour space a bit more without introducing other artefacts?
Yeah. Anyway, you can look forward to Steve's review. It will be live, hopefully either when this podcast goes out or just after it going out. So keep your eyes open for that review. I know it'll be well read. So I got a package delivered on Saturday. Very rare delivery on a Saturday, but I think JVC wanted to get it through as quickly as possible with Christmas and Star Wars and everything else coming up that's important this month, more important than most everything else. The JVC X7000 arrived, and it just so happened that because of all the issues that we discussed last week, the VW520, it's still here. I haven't quite finished the review with that, and I knew the JVC was coming, so I've kind of hung on to it a little bit longer than I probably needed to. But I did it with the prospect of putting them head to head and finding out, how the 7000 matches up to the 520. And let's face it, there's about $3,000 worth of difference between the two. The JVC is a 1080 panel, but it uses eShift 4, and obviously the Sony is a native 4K projector. There's other differences in there between how the projectors work. I mean, the problem with the Sony is the gamma, and we've just been discussing gamma with Hisense. Well, there's no real way to tame the gamma unless you use the gamma editor software, which I don't have access to at the time of this review. Otherwise, the gamma is all over the place. It's either down at 2 or 1.8 at some points in the black levels, and then it raises all over the place. And trying to get a flat gamma had taken me some time to get that working. So that was one issue with the Sony, whereas the JVC, and I only set it up over the weekend, haven't put any hours onto it really, but knowing the JVCs, you stick it in a couple of modes, move a couple of controls, and you're in a ballpark. Put it at 2.4 in the gamma, and it looked like probably about 2.2 to be honest, but it looked really nice. It had a lot of depth to the image. The other difference between the two, obviously, when you're doing head to head, is the Sony is a 4K panel, a proper 4K panel, whereas obviously the JVC is a 1080. So there is a difference, even at the same distance and zoom levels and all the rest of it. There is a difference in frame size. Very subtle, but it is there when you're doing a back to back between the two of them. Obviously, because the Sony's upscaling 1080 to that panel size. So I guess the question is, head to head, how do they look? Well, you're just going to have to read the review.
But you told us earlier.
I told you, but I'm not telling them. They'll just have to wait. It's like we discussed last week and the week before. You notice other differences in the image other than resolution. And it was a question that was brought up in, I think it was the last podcast comments, somebody saying that they did see a difference, and they might have seen a difference. I'm not saying that they didn't, because it's so easy to introduce differences other than resolution. Brightness is the main one, because the brighter the image, it tends to look sharper, and it's not necessarily the case. And that was always the case when you put an LCD next to a plasma TV. You used to think, well, the LCD is a bit sharper. Well, usually because the LCD was brighter, and it plays on your mind. I mean, it is scientifically proven, isn't it, Mark, that differences in brightness, it's why all the TVs in a showroom are mega bright.
It's pretty much the biggest factor in people deciding on a TV in a shop to see the brightest one, that's the best.
Yeah,
human nature.
Yeah, so I did take some time making sure that both these projectors were round about the same light output, and I tried to get the gamma as close as possible on both of them. It's pretty obvious that in every mode other than standard, the JVC's wider colour gamut. That's quite easy to see. Nice looking as well. I mean, I didn't see any banding in there or any... I shouldn't use the term banding, because technically it's the correct term to use, but people automatically relate that to TV. So I think I'm better in saying colour gradation was better. There was no noticeable stepping in colours that changed hue really, really nice looking colour-wise on the X7000 there. The Sony is a little bit disappointing because it's not that wide a colour gamut. Once you get past 709, it's only a little bit wider than 709 natively. It has a mode called BT 2020. And you put it in that mode and it's just a little bit wider than 709, but it's technically correct because it says BT 2020, and so we're told, the container, that everything within the container is called BT 2020. So really Rec 709 is BT 2020 because it's within the container. Are you confused yet?
Is it a 10-bit panel on the JVC, Phil?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's probably making a difference. That's probably making a difference to the gradations, is it?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, it's 10-bit process and it's on there. So yeah, it makes a difference, and it's the same on the Sony. But it's just that the Sony's there is this difference. It just
everyone has you're allowed to have a favourite type of image, and if you prefer one over the other, that's fine, isn't it? There's some personal preference. It's not all. I think on a level playing field, there's got to be some personal preference.
Yeah, I think my issue with the Sony is definitely the gamma, because I mean that's the thing. It is HDR. I haven't had time to put HDR through the 7000. I didn't see anything in the menus with on-off button or anything like that. So,
no, it's not. No.
So I would imagine that it's going to work on metadata.
It's supposed to. That's what they said to me when they did that demo at IFA. They said
right.
At the time they were switching it manually. They said when we release the product, it will detect automatically using metadata. So
obviously that's going to be interesting because I've got one HDR clip, which is the Sony Cine Ultra clip, which I don't think has metadata. So it'll be interesting to see what the JVC
can watch
does
Amazon now, Phil, with your new internet capabilities.
Yeah. Watch it through what?
Oh, sorry, no idea. That's a good question.
Did you not send Phil a box?
It won't do. It doesn't do HDR, does it?
No.
No. Sorry.
You can send me the Fire TV if you like.
Yeah, I can. I will.
So I guess the big question is, Phil, I mean, difference in price aside, which would you, if you were buying a projector right now, would you go for the Sony or for the JVC?
I think if I was gaming a lot and I was using it for TV and sports and maybe in a lighter room, I think the Sony is appealing. And there is a difference in sharpness. I said, in terms of differences between 1080 upscale material, there's normal viewing distance 9, and with 4K material, it took me a little longer because I have to plug the HDMI in and out, and I couldn't use a splitter to do that. So there was a little big gap. So I kept going backwards and forwards with 4K material. Until you get about 4 feet away, there's not a great deal in it. 4 feet, there is quite a bit a little bit of difference there. You can notice the sharpness and so on. As you go further back, I think if it was a blind test, I'd be hard pushed. It would be other factors that would be telling me what the projector was other than the resolution. The Sony's a little bit sharper when it comes to, and it's just the pattern that they use. It's a lot nicer pattern to get the focus right. So if you're a one-man team, having to do the focus from with your nose on the screen, it's a nicer pattern on the Sony. I could get that sharper than I could the JVC, but then watching material, I couldn't tell any difference in terms of sharpness and stuff when they're all set. Can you see I'm avoiding this question? I guess just from a price performance point of view at the moment, and I haven't done any of the testing with the JVC yet. It's fresh out the box. It hasn't been soaked in. I like to soak it in for at least 30 to 50 hours. So it's running, and it'll be running for the next couple of days. And I'll go in and do bits and pieces, but I won't do the calibration runs again until there's a good few hours on it. At the minute, the JVC, I think, just because I know you said take the price out of it, but I think price is a big thing here. It's a £3,000 difference. And I don't think there's a £3,000 difference there in performance terms. If you've got the VW500, it's a cracking projector. Hang on to it. The only thing it won't do is HDR, and I don't think you need to worry about that.
It won't do HDR, but it will cover HDCP 2.2, so it can handle.
So if you've got the 500, you've got the 500 VW500. The VW520 is not an upgrade. The only thing they're adding is HDR. I'd hang on to your 500. It's a cracking machine, really good projector, and I've got to say I really like the VW520. It's just overpriced, in my opinion, for what you're actually getting compared to the competition. And the big thing is resolution, and to be honest with you, resolution is not that big a thing when there's other factors to take into account, such as HDMI, wider colour space, and so on, which when we get HD Blu-ray, UHD Blu-ray next March, hopefully, in this country, that's when you can start taking advantage of the wider colour spaces and HDR support, where I think the JVC's better value at this moment in time. It could all change when I do some tests, and I might find some really nasty things that are not good. I don't think so. So anyway, the reviews, hopefully, the Sony will go up this week. I was even looking at another projector, by the way, the little BenQ W2000, marketed as the BenQ W2000 with Rec 709. Well, everybody's got a wider colour. Got to say, 800 quid. It's a little DLP unit. Black's not great, mediocre blacks on it. But if you're using it in a room with light coloured walls and ceiling, your black level's raised anyway, so you probably wouldn't notice a great deal of difference there. I've got to say, probably the best DLP projector I've seen for quite a while at that price point. Really nice image, really nice motion, superb 3D. Colours looked really nice as well. Even out the box, even though it was slightly wider than 709, and green is never correct on a DLP because of the colour wheel. They've tried their hardest to get to Rec 709. It's slightly over 709, but I've got to say, it produces a really nice image, and anybody that's buying it at that price point is not going to give a jot about whether it's 709 or not, or wide colour gamut or whatever. They just want a big screen, entertaining projector, and at that price point, you can play games on it. 50 milliseconds was the lag time. Really nice image. Motion was superb, so if you like big screen sports and that kind of thing, top-notch projector, 800 quid. So it just shows you don't have to spend thousands to get a great image, and that's the type of thing as well that you could take out of the cupboard, set it up in 10 minutes, pointing at a white wall, especially at Christmas, because it's got built-in speakers in the back as well. They sound rubbish, but, you know.
That sounds good for 800 quid.
It's almost a one-stop shop at 800 quid, so really good. Right, so let's move things on to the stuff that we watch on our projectors and our TVs. And Steve, you have had your first DTS-X experience in the home. You got some firmware for the Denon AVR that you own. You have your first DTS-X disc. What did you think?
I thought it was very good, although I guess coming off the back of having already had Atmos for over a year, it wasn't as wow as it would have been otherwise, because it's basically the same. I should stress, this is the beta firmware update. Has not been released yet. Should be coming out in January. I don't have a firm date, by the way, so I just think it should be coming out in January. But it's DTS-X update. Now, the first thing, anyone who's familiar with Dolby Atmos and has it on their receivers at the moment are probably familiar with a thing called they call it Dolby Surround. It's basically the up mixer. So when you're watching Dolby True HD or DTS HD Master Audio soundtrack, you can use the up mixer to sort of draw out some overhead effects and that kind of stuff, and fill out the sound. And that works. It currently works if you've got Dolby Atmos. It currently works on both Dolby True HD and DTS Master Audio soundtracks. Now, once I installed the update for DTS-X, when you're playing a DTS Master Audio soundtrack, you can only use it now with what's called DTS-X Neural, and so you can no longer use Dolby Atmos up mixer instead. It's a proprietary thing, I guess, So with a DTS soundtrack, you use the DTS-X Neural, and with Dolby Atmos, with the Dolby True HD soundtrack, you'd use the Atmos up mixer. That's the first thing you notice immediately, is that you're restricted to one or the other depending on the soundtrack you're listening to. But in terms of as an up mixer, it works very well. As I mentioned earlier, I was watching the Star Wars films over the weekend, and he did a great job of really filling out that sound. You get the impression, like when the Star Destroyer is flying overhead, it really is flying overhead. So it works really well. It worked very well, by the way, if you used when I could use Dolby Atmos as well. But that's not by the by. It works well. In terms of actual content, I've got the DTS demo disc that we got at CES back at the beginning of the year, and there's a couple of quite good demos in there. There's that clip that we saw, Phil, with the frogs and the fly.
Yeah.
Little animated sequence with these two frogs and this fly buzzing around the room. And in DTS-X, I watched it both in DTS HD Master Audio and in DTS-X because it was available in both versions on the disc, which was handy for doing comparisons. And there was a greater sense of immersion and the fly flying around over your head and this kind of stuff. There was a clip from Divergent, and I had that on Blu-ray as well. So again, I was able to actually compare exactly the same scene, both in normal DTS HD Master Audio, up mixed with X Neural, and also the DTS-X soundtrack. And there was a huge difference in this. I mean, whether it's the sound mixer was really going for it in terms of making the most out of having an object-based sound mix and more options in terms of overhead speakers. But it was way more immersive in the DTSX version than it was just in the DTS Master Audio version. So that was interesting. That was a really noticeable difference in terms of. And there's, I think I mentioned when I reviewed the soundtrack for Insurgent, which was an Atmos mix. There's lots of sequences where they're in sort of like these dream test worlds, and they really do amp up the sound and really make it as immersive as possible to differentiate from when they're not in the real world and when they're in these dream sequences. And it works really well in that sense. That was impressive. I've also got Ex Machina, which was the first disc released with a DTSX soundtrack. Not necessarily the best film to choose, I don't think, because it's largely people just talking in rooms. It's not a particularly aggressive sound mix at the best of times. It's, so whether it was adding, I didn't feel like it was adding much to it. But then again, I don't think anything would have added much to that film in terms of its sound design. It was more of there was a sense of space within rooms, but it's basically people talking. And some of the soundtrack sounded quite good. But so far, I'm impressed. But given that I'm coming off the back of having already had Atmos for a year, it's probably not as impressive as it would be for somebody who just hadn't heard either initially and just went straight into DTSX. It's certainly, I think we mentioned this before, it's taken a long time to come to market. We had a demo a year ago at CES.
What a strange demo that was as well.
Yeah, it was a brilliant one.
I mean, even having spoken to... forgive me, I forget the guy's name. We spoke to him on the podcast a few months. So we spoke to Jordan from DTS on the podcast. Was that around about May time? I think it was.
Yeah, back in the summer, yeah.
Yeah, back in the summer. And he told us what the setup was. And even then, it was still a strange setup on the horizontal and vertical plane. So I'm assuming that you're using identical layout for your speakers in your room.
The setup I'm using an 11-channel setup with 4 overheads. It's identical to setup that you do. I mean, there is one setup basically, and then it just uses the same layout for either Atmos or DTSX. And I have heard, apparently, speaking of immersive sound formats, because obviously last week Pixels came out in this country on Blu-ray with an Auro-3D soundtrack, which is the first one. There has been Red Tails was released in Germany with an Auro-3D soundtrack, but this was the first one in this country. Which is interesting, given you thought it would be one or the other, but suddenly Auro's back in the game a little bit. I've heard that they're actually moving to an object-based platform, and if they had any sense, they'd also move to the same format layout as speakers. Just because, in the old days, it was very straightforward. You could listen to a PCM track, you could listen to a True HD, you could listen to a DTS Master Audio, but the speaker layout was identical, and it was purely a question of what your processor could do or amplifier could do, or what disc you had. And if they could replicate that situation now with a layout, a speaker configuration that could be used for any of those formats, I think that's much better for the consumer and probably better in the long run for the sound systems themselves, because there's no competition going on. It's just you can either have whichever one you want on your disc, and then it's at the discretion of the studio, I guess, to decide which one they want to use. But yeah, in terms of setup, I just set it up as I had previously been setting it up for Atmos. So it's 11-channel configuration with 7 surround channels, 3 at the front, 2 sides, 2 rears, 4 overhead, and 2 subs at the front. So that's how it's set up. Okay,
I guess we're going to catch up with all these, hopefully. Did we mention we're going to CES? Have we mentioned that at all at any point? We're going to CES. It's coming very soon. Christmas just gets in the way. You should just cancel Christmas and just straight to CES.
Well, Star Wars and CES.
Yeah, that's what it should be. Or Star Wars, watch Star Wars again, then CES. Anyway, we're going to CES. We will speak to Dolby, we'll speak to Auro, and we'll speak to DTS as well, and we'll see where things are, how things are developing. I guess we're well into next year now before we see definitely DTSX anyway coming to existing AVRs and new AVRs that are going to get announced. So in terms of immersive audio, things still moving along. It's taken a little bit longer than I thought it was going to take, Steve, for immersive, and Dolby really have a head start on this, to be honest.
They do. They've got like at least 30 discs now available with Dolby Atmos soundtracks and more on the way. So they've definitely got a head start in that sense. And it should be pointed out that the only DTSX soundtracks released so far have all been done by Lionsgate. So it's Ex Machina. They've also got just come out American Ultra and coming out in January Sicario. But they're all Lionsgate movies. So they're supporting it to a degree. But they've always been first to embrace new formats. They also did they were very quick to embrace Dolby Atmos. They did a DTS, what was it called? Not DTSX, the forerunner.
The Neo thingy, Bob.
Neo, yeah, DTS Neo X. They did one of those for Spendables 2. So they've always been kind of hot on that. The question is going to be what the other studios do. And up to now, in terms of Atmos, the support's been there from Warner Brothers, from Paramount, and from Universal, and more recently from Sony. So 4 of the major studios are supporting Atmos. We've yet to see anything from either Fox or Disney. They're the only 2 studios I can think of that haven't released anything with an Atmos soundtrack yet, or for that matter, any other formats, and not Auro or DTSX. They've released no immersive audio soundtrack. Whether they're saving that for their 4K Blu-ray format or whether they just aren't decided on it yet, I don't know. But they're yet to announce. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the Dolby's been available in the marketplace for over a year now. I think I set up mine probably it was September last year. So it's been around for quite some time. It's got a reasonable amount, a reasonable established. I mean 30 is not a lot, but it's quite good for a year in a new format.
It's better than one.
Quite, yeah.
That's the thing. It's interesting you mentioned DTS Neo, because DTS have this habit of brand new technology. I mean, DTS Discrete, there was about 3 discs made for that because it was a home format. It wasn't in the cinema.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. I mean, if there's no cinema releases being mixed DTSX, and I know there's going to be a couple, but not all of them are going to be. They're going to have to be home mixes, and then that adds a degree of complexity and adds costs as well. The main worry I would have, especially if I'm going to have to pay for an update, is are we going to get content in it, and is the content going to be worthwhile?
Yes, I mean, what content are we going to get, and how much of it is always key. It seems to me as if, certainly, as I said, from the studios that have supported to date, there's a bit of a, most new releases now appear to be coming out. It was and it obviously depends on the film too. So, for example, last week, there was The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Dolby Atmos soundtrack. There was Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, Dolby Atmos soundtrack. Then you had Pixels, Auro-3D soundtrack. So 3 of the big releases last week had immersive audio soundtracks on them. So there's clearly, it's gaining a bit of momentum now. And I think it will probably gain more momentum, hopefully with Ultra HD 4K. But if you buy a receiver now, it's going to support both anyway. So there's no real additional cost other than buying a new receiver. So if you've got an old receiver, there's a question of buying a new one. But if you're in the market for a receiver, it's a relatively straightforward upgrade. Other than obviously having to install speakers overhead. That's the tricky bit. But you can use the upward firing speakers as an alternative.
It's the bit I haven't bothered with so far. It's like, I really can't be bothered with that. It's getting drill out and out of position. Oh, no.
I've got to say, though, I mean, you can debate the merits of immersive audio soundtracks, but I can certainly say that there have been films where I've really thought that's really added to my experience. And even stuff that's older. So, for example, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I always thought had a great soundtrack and always had a very active, loads of surround action. It was, if you listen to that, watch that movie, and just listen to the soundtrack, there's never a quiet second. There's always something going on in that soundtrack. It's quite impressive for '92 particularly. The Atmos remix of that is fantastic. You're really immersive, and you're constantly having these sounds coming around you and over you and stuff. It works really well. So there are definitely examples I can think of which have genuinely improved my viewing experience. There are others, for example, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I've got to say that whilst there was a degree of immersion there, and a few times when effects worked quite well and you felt the overhead speakers, a lot of the time it just sounded like a 7.1 mix. So there are other films where perhaps it's not used as much. But when it is used well, and I'm thinking here of things like Mad Max Fury Road or Terminator Genesis, it can definitely add to the experience.
Right, that's hardware. Talking about movies, we'll be back in a second with movie reviews. With no reviews.
No reviews. Oh, well, no movies.
We'll be back in a minute anyway. Right, okay, so films released this week. We don't need to go there. We did 20 minutes at the start, which is why we're well over time now. Force Awakens opens on Thursday. I think everybody on the planet is probably going to have seen it by Saturday. No doubt. So, yep. Blu-rays?
Yeah, the only big Blu-ray release this week is the Fantastic Four, which was the 20th Century Fox reboot of the comic book franchise, which was absolutely terrible. So do not buy it. It's a bloody awful film. Don't give Fox any money. Don't encourage Fox to make any more of this rubbish. Ideally, you want it to tank beyond belief, so that which it already has done at the cinema, but also tank on home video as well, so that they'll give the rights back to, they'll go crawling back to Marvel and beg them to help them out because they haven't got a clue what they're doing. And this was a terrible movie. So, avoid like the plague.
Okay, thanks for sitting on the fence and giving us a balanced review of that one. Talking about Star Wars, right, and saying that everybody on the planet is probably going to see it, I was stretching things a little bit, but interesting.
Not too much, actually.
Probably not. Cinema tendencies. You sent me the chart along, and it was really interesting reading, to be honest. Looking at the chart very quickly, I mean, up until, I think, 1956, there was 1 billion people a year going to the cinema, if I'm reading that correctly.
Well,
that's
1 billion admissions a year.
A billion.
Go more than
right.
once.
Up until
1.3.
1.1.
1948, 1.5 billion admissions in a single year.
Yeah. So 1956, it started dipping under the billion to about 1971, and then things just tended to plummet. I mean, in the 80s, you're down to tens of millions. Let's see, what was the worst one? Was 50.
Was that VHS?
Well, if you look at the numbers, you can start to see a significant drop in attendances in the late 50s and particularly in the early 60s. What was happening? TV.
Yep.
TV came along, late 50s, early 60s, and it goes from 1 billion admissions in 56, 1.1 billion admissions in 56. By 1964, so 8 years later, it's 300 million. So that's a precipitous drop in attendances. Massive. Yeah. By 66, it's down to 288 million. It keeps on. In fact, it's just dropping every year after that.
But the main date here, or the main year, is 1971, is 176 million. And we don't see it, and it just drops off the cliff, sort of 77. You'd imagine 77 with Star Wars, and that is still only 103.
No. Don't forget, Star Wars didn't come out in this country till 78. So
this is UK only, is it?
Yeah, this is the UK.
All right, okay. So 78, 126. So it jumped up about 20 odd million, and 79 is in pretty decent order as well. But then 1981 to about 1990, it's well under 100 million. I mean, the lowest point is 1984 with 54 million.
Yeah, that's when video, Mark, you're right. That's when that really hit cinema.
Yeah. So, and then I guess the next one is kind of round about, it's going to be 1990, 91. It starts climbing again, 91, starts going up again. It goes up every year. Even when DVD is launched in 97, it's back up to 139 million. And I guess the important one is 2002 matches 1971 by a difference of about 10,000 people.
Is this when all the multiplexes were opening then? Around this?
Well, 2002, that was the year of the second Harry Potter movie and the second Lord of the Rings film. So that was a bit of an unusual. If you look at it, it's a little bit of a spike then. You can actually spot when big films have come out. So
but then
2009 Avatar hits. That's the next one when it's in 170 odd. So it falls from 2002, but it doesn't fall much. You're only talking like 3 or 4 million a year difference up until 2009, where it goes back up to 173, and then 2012 it's back up to sort of 172 million, and then there's a drop again, and quite a big drop down to 2004. I mean, you're losing about 20 million there. So if you look at the last decade, it's been consistently around about 150 to 170 million, with peaks around years when there's been some significant things like Avatar, for example. The reason I bring it up really was because based upon the numbers to date this year, if Star Wars is the success we're all expecting it to be, this will be the biggest year since 2002, and then since 1971, in fact, a real peak in terms of cinema attendances.
Could it be 200 million this year?
Who knows? Because
there's been some other big releases, haven't there, this year?
Yeah, Jurassic World was a monstrous success, to everyone's surprise. Obviously,
no pun.
Spectre's done well. It's been a big hit.
So Avengers and Age of Ultron.
So the last year where it broke 200 million was 1969.
Yes.
Was the last time it was over 200 million.
I reckon it could.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go and see it as many times as I possibly can.
I'm going twice.
I'm going at least twice, probably 3.
At least twice. I'm sure when we're in Vegas, we'll go and see it as well.
Go and see it in IMAX somewhere.
Yeah.
I just think what's amazing is, and you pointed out at the beginning, Phil, it's just how many times people went to cinema in the 40s and 50s before TV came along.
Yeah.
It was the dominant form of entertainment, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, up until 1956, which is the main year for TV to get launched, it was over 1 billion.
Yeah.
It didn't drop to under 1 billion until 1957. And then it was a pretty significant drop because it halves between 1956 and 1960. The attendance literally halves. And then it just keeps going down. So 500 million, 1960, and by the time you get to 1971, it's 175, 176.
I was going to ask what was responsible for the upswing in the late 80s when the trend started to reverse.
I think it was multiplexes, and it became an experience to go back to the cinema again. And I remember going back to the cinema when you had the big UCI chain. I think they were really the ones that kicked it off again, wasn't it? UCI and so on, building lots of cinemas in a lot of shopping centres and that kind of thing. And then you had the resurgence of Odeon as well. And who was the other one? Virgin owned them.
Village? No, that was Warner.
That was Warner. Yeah, well, you had Warner and Village getting together to create a company as well. So they turned into View eventually. But yeah, I mean, that started, and presentation as well. I remember going back in those days, and you had trailers for Dolby SR. You had the Egyptian and the train and you had trailers before the films telling you what the sound system was, and if you're at a THX cinema, THX, and it was a bit of a presentation. You didn't have 45 minutes adverts. You had adverts, but it wasn't a 45 minutes of adverts and trailers beforehand, was it? It was a bit of an experience. And I haven't had that recently. I think the last time I had an experience like that was in the States when I went to Cinerama Cinema to see Avatar, which would have been 2010?
Yeah, early 2010, wasn't it?
Early 2010. So in LA. And there was no adverts or anything. A guy came up and did a presentation at the start, and then it was straight into the film. And that's the last time I've had an experience where it was all about the presentation of the film. And I think we lose that nowadays, especially with automation and all the rest of it. You know, I've sat in films where it's been out of focus because nobody's coming and checking focus anymore. You know what I mean? And it kind of put me off the cinema after a while. I mean, there was one presentation I went to, and it was projected on the ceiling for the first 5 minutes.
That is a dreadful fail, though, isn't it? That's a real epic one.
Yeah, but that's because of automation, you know what I mean? It's all automated, and nobody was coming along and checking it. And things haven't gotten any better because you've gone from having 2 or 3 projectionists working in... It used to be a long booth that would be the full length of the building and screens either side. So projectors either side all the way down, depending on how many screens it was. That's how the old new multiplexes were designed, and you'd have about 3 people checking, and they would see when it changed over to scope, and they would go up and they would check focus and so on. You don't even get that now. You get maybe 1 person working in there just making sure that things start when they're supposed to start, because they're all keyed now, aren't they, Steve? So it tells it what time of the day it's supposed to show it, and it can't show it any other times other than the times it's programmed into it and keyed. Yeah, exactly. So it's so automated nowadays. So yeah, I think the whole
we've lost the artistry of the cinema projectionist, but at the same time, I think we can all agree that going to the cinema in terms of the quality you'll get, significantly
other than a 65 or 70mm print presentation, which you no longer get to see now. Apart from and I think there's only 1 or 2 venues in the UK left now that can do that. 35mm was a disaster. 35mm was rubbish because you were seeing it. Back in the early days, because it was so expensive, you were seeing it after the US run. So you were looking at prints that had already run probably 100 times through the projector. And prints were never great because they're about 4th or 5th generation copies. So you've lost a lot of the detail, a lot of the... When it comes to digital projection, these days, when it's 2K or 4K, it's astonishingly good compared to 35mm prints, which were... terrible. Even a first strike print didn't look great because it was, like I say, it's 4 or 5 generations.
So I mean, that's it's great. I just didn't realise actually. You know, I remember back in the 80s people talking about, you know, the death of cinema and cinema being in real trouble, and I thought, well, really, I'll go to the movies every now and then. But looking at the numbers, you understand now what they meant. The fact that in 1984 there were 54 million admissions in the cinema, and in 1946 there were 1.635 billion.
Yeah.
So that's almost a 1.1 billion fall in attendances in a space of 38 years. That's just staggering.
Yeah, but again, even though we're talking about multiplexes in the early 90s into the 2000s, you got to remember that there was at least 2 or 3 cinemas in every town in the UK. I mean, I remember my hometown, population of 20,000, and there used to be 1, 2, 3 cinemas.
We used to have 5 in
in Bath.
Yeah, in the 50s, you know. and they burnt down or they got redeveloped into shopping centres or whatever. But there used to be more than one cinema in a town, so you got to remember that as well, which is not the case now. I mean, there's a lot of places where you'd have to travel 30 mile odd to get to a multiplex these days.
Yep.
Well, at least a decent one.
Well,
but it's good to see that numbers are, at least if not growing, certainly they've plateaued at a decent level again after the worst of the 80s. You know, there's been a definite, people have started going back to the movies because it's a better experience, because it's more enjoyable, because it's technically superior than the way it was before. The quality's better. And I guess at the same time, though, Steve, it's got more competition than it's ever had in terms of people's time, recreation time, that kind of thing. Watching a film. I mean, some people watch films on their mobiles now. You know, that's there, and they think that's perfectly all right to sit and watch a mobile phone and watch a film on it. There's streaming, there's Blu-rays, there's DVDs, there's TV, there's catch-up TV, there's so many other things that people could be spending their time and money on now compared to even 10 years ago. I tell you what's amazing is also, I just realised looking at it, is how in cinema attendance has increased between 1939 and 1945. You thought with, things like bombing and that sort of stuff, you wouldn't be going to the cinema as much, but people were going to cinema more than ever.
But
that's where they got the news from.
But that's where they got the news, Steve. They didn't have the 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock news,
also,
did they? So
you needed to escape from the realities of life, didn't you, for a bit?
God, do I need that. Right, so I think if we all clump together and everybody that listens to this podcast clumps together, I think we could reach 1 billion. For Star Wars, do you know? The number of times you're going to go and see it. Right, okay, so it opens tomorrow if you're listening to this podcast. What are we expecting numbers wise? I'm gonna put 4.2 billion. I think that's what it'll...
You think it'll make 4.2 billion in total?
Yeah, that's what I think. In total, 4.2 billion.
I need context.
Well, he means worldwide total run.
Yeah, worldwide total run. I mean, it's not going to do that in the UK.
What's the biggest ever?
Avatar, 2.7 billion.
2.7.
So I reckon it's going to at least
3.5.
Yeah, okay, good number.
I think it'll make $1 billion within its first week. I think it'll make, because I mean, Jurassic World made $500 million in a week. So if that can do that, then this can make $1 billion. I think it'll make a lot very quickly. Whether it'll keep going after that depends on the quality of the film and how much repeat viewing it gets. I think it'll definitely make $1 billion in its first week, and it'll make at least $2 billion worldwide. Whether it'll beat Avatar, I don't know. It could get to 3.
I think it will, because there's absolutely nothing else at the cinema, and the IMAX screens are booked up for 3 weeks solid.
Yeah, but the IMAX doesn't make that much. It depends. If people keep going back to the cinema, that's the thing. They go the once, fine, it'll do very well very quickly. But they have to keep going back over and over again to generate that kind of momentum to get past $2 billion at the box office. Because you've got to remember that there's a huge drop-off. It's like 2.7, 2.2, both Cameron films. Then it's 1.6. So there's been some big hits that haven't got close to that yet. So, but I think it will make at least 2.
I've got to really say, Steve, it's going to do better than Independence Day 2. I saw the trailer for that yesterday. It looks goddamn awful.
It's so bad even Will Smith didn't come back.
Nah. Turkey. There's your turkey, and it's not even Christmas.
Play turkey all year round, yeah. Not just for Christmas these days.
Thanks for that, Mark.
Okay.
And on that bombshell, that's it for this week. Thanks very much for listening. Sorry we've been so on message, but you can guarantee that next week's podcast won't be. We will be discussing the best of the year. We'll be discussing our personal highlights of 2015, whether that's AV or not, up to people. Ed will be sober, hopefully, because he's away drinking today. Wish I was away drinking. But that's it for the podcast. So my thanks to Steve Withers.
I beg your pardon. What do you mean naked?
And that was a terrible line. And Mark Hodgkinson.
Remember, your focus determines your reality.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video. And of course, leave us 5 stars on iTunes and we'll read your name out on the Christmas special next week. So go away and do that. It has to be on iTunes. Do not put your 5-star ratings at the bottom of the podcast in the podcast forum. go and give us a ratings on iTunes. It pushes the podcast up the charts. It pushes it onto front pages so more people can find us and join our community and get involved. So please do that. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you at the end of year Christmas special, which will probably be all about Star Wars.